My older boy is a soccer player, so a couple of Christmases ago I got him this soccer-themed game called Helvetia Cup. Now, despite the fact that the family rules make for a very fun game and a really decent little kind of easy soccer simulation, the problem is the theme is just so weird. We have one team that is made up of dragons, and the other team are made up of, I think they call them fools. They're meant to be these court jester type of people. So it's very bizarre theming, plus the game components themselves are largely pretty much trash in terms of their quality. So what I decided to do, because he enjoyed the game, but I could tell he really wasn't excited about the theme, I thought, you know what, I'm going to take this game and I'm going to redo it so that it is an actual soccer game. And in the process, what ended up happening was I ended up redoing every single little component of the family game, the sort of easy version of the game. So this is a look at crafting and game enhancement, essentially. It is all the steps I took to improve the physical components of the game and show you what I made. So in the end, Helvetia Cup ended up turning into UEFA Champions League, Barcelona vs Manchester United. Let me show you all the crazy stuff I did with this. My starting point was the figures. I knew I had to find some little mini soccer players somewhere, and that from there I could sort of build the rest of the game around that. Now, it wasn't so easy to find minis of soccer players. I did consider some sort of Subbuteo figures and various other even Playmobil stuff, but ultimately what I ended up finding was a set of foosball figures that come with their own bases. So the teams that I happened to find were Barcelona and Manchester United, although I was looking for Barcelona specifically because my son liked the team or the team colors, or for whatever reason he liked Barcelona, so I was really hoping to find that as one of the teams, and the other team didn't quite matter so much. I just picked an English team in Manchester United. Now, when I found these figures, I thought, they're amazing, they're perfect for a game, but they're big, and the figures and their size are ultimately what ended up having to determine the scale of everything else in the game. So with figures this large, I knew I had to next come up with a map, or at least create a map that was suitable for their size. So I ended up doing that from scratch, and this is what I ended up with. I'm going to clear off some room and show you this a little bit better. Okay, this board ended up being the biggest pain in the butt of anything else to deal with, because I knew I wanted sort of a green turf-like surface, and I wanted these colored circles on it to make the gameplay super simple. I have both numbers and I have colored circles indicating distances from the net, which side you're shooting from, and all of that makes the whole process of just taking shots on net in the game very, very simple. Takes away any confusion that might arise from which side you're shooting on versus which side the goalie is blocking and that sort of thing. But in terms of the map itself, I started off with a felt surface. I thought felt would be perfect because it has that sort of very much a turf-like texture and look to it, and it would be great for a soccer field. And so I got a sheet of felt and I got some fabric markers, hoping that I would be able to draw these circles with the fabric markers onto the felt and thus create my map that way. However, that didn't work out very well. The problem with felt is it's a very stringy surface, so as soon as you try to start drawing on it with markers, it pulls up the little strings and it doesn't go on neatly, for one thing, and the fabric markers I got also just didn't happen to work very well on the felt, so that ended up being a bit of a fail. So next I went out to a huge fabric warehouse and I just wandered rows and rows and rows of fabric samples, just looking for something green, maybe smooth, maybe a little bit spongy, whatever. What I ended up finding was this fabric they call, I think, nautical fabric or something like that. It is almost a leather-like feel to it. It's a nice dark green, so it is a perfect background for the soccer pitch. And it didn't have that soft texture that made putting anything on top of it very difficult. So I got this big sheet of green leather-like fabric, and then I sort of cut it to size and glued it on top of a big poster board thing that we had lying around. It used to be a giant poster. I cut it to size and used spray glue to glue the fabric on top of it. Next, I had to get these colored circles on top, so I went out and bought paint markers this time and thought maybe I can somehow paint on top, well, use the paint markers to create those circles. Again, when I experimented on scrap pieces of the fabric that I had gotten, the markers just did not work out very well. For one thing, it's hard to draw a good circle. So, and then using a paint marker, it's that much more difficult because you need some kind of template, and the paint itself kind of smears and smudges if you're using templates. So the paint markers didn't work so well. What ended up really saving my butt was my wife, or my ex-wife now, I guess, has a friend who does work with vinyl stickers, and so she ended up creating all these colored circles that I ended up being able to just peel off the backing and stick onto the map. And in that manner, I have perfect circles, and they stuck very well to the fabric I had purchased. And then I still had to draw the white lines of the soccer pitch to mark the goal crease and the center line and so forth. And for those, I did end up using one of my paint markers, and they didn't come out super neat because, again, using rulers with the paint markers, the paint tends to bleed a bit under the ruler and then get smudged a bit and that sort of thing. But it worked out fairly well for the purposes I needed it to do. The final point is I have these very small numbers marked on the map that are close to the, well, anything within, I guess, 4 shooting spaces of the net I have marked with a number to indicate its distance from the net. And for those, I used just standard number stickers. I just got a sticker set and stuck those on here, and they worked very well for that purpose. So that is finally how the board came together after a lot of experimentation and frustration. And when it was all done, I think I sprayed it with a clear coat to sort of protect it as best I could as well. Let me once again reset and show you some of the other components here. Let's talk about the soccer balls and the nets now. So the original soccer ball token was this tiny little ball here. What I ended up doing was finding a Playmobil soccer ball, and I glued it on top of a wooden green disc here so that it wouldn't roll around on the map. And that makes for a pretty convenient soccer ball. The original nets in the game, where players had to predict where your opponent was shooting when it came time to using your goalie, it used these tiny little black pegs that you would secretly choose locations on the net where your goalie was going to make the save, and those pegs then would mark where you're hopefully going to save the shot. Now, the nets that I've gotten, again, are Playmobil soccer nets. And what I've done is I've made these removable surfaces on them that are color-coded according to sections of where the ball is being shot from. So if it's being shot from the red section here, this goes on. And then depending on how far away the shooter is, the goalie gets to put their tokens on here. Instead of pegs, I have magnetized wooden tokens here that have a little picture of a pair of goalie gloves stopping a ball. They're a little bit difficult to see, but those are magnetized to stick right on there to indicate where the goalie is going in the net, and they are easily removable. And again, I have purple for shots coming from center, and I have blue for shots coming from the blue side of the field. Again, all with magnetized spots to put your goalie gloves. So this makes for very easy and non-confusing. That was really the only confusing part of the family rules, was the fact that you're having to try to say, okay, the shot's coming from the left side of the net, but from the goalie's perspective, that's my right. So do I put the peg in the left side or the right side if I want to save on that side? And it got quite confusing, actually. But with my color-coded system, that takes away all the confusion and makes it super easy to use. And now let's look at a couple other things here. I almost forgot a couple of things related to the nets. So I made these player screens so that players can secretly plan on where their goalie is making the save. And I forgot to mention that the shooter also takes a ball and decides where in the net they're shooting. So again, I've taken a standard Playmobil soccer ball, but this time I've glued a little magnet to it so that when the shooter decides what part of the net they're shooting on, they can, behind their screen, put their ball on the appropriate part of the net, and that's where their shot is going. So in the same way that the defender, the player with the goalkeeper, decides what part is being saved by the goalie, the shooter also does the same thing at the same time behind their player screens here. Let's look at the player cards next. In the original game, each individual player had their own card with their offensive and defensive stats, as well as their energy boost markers. And so I've done something similar for each of my players. I have found a real-life photo of the player, got the appropriate offensive and defensive stats in there. This time I've done all of it to scale, whereas the original ones weren't necessarily done to scale. And then I have my energy boost markers here as well. So again, makes ease of play very straightforward. I have a customized D20 for each team. So I have the red and yellow D20 for Manchester United, and I have this purple and blue for Barcelona. The original game had a score and time tracker with teeny tiny little markers on it. What I've done is I've created separate time and score mark tracks. So using foam board and magnetized paper, I've made both of these tracks. The time track has a trophy here marking it. It's got a magnet on the bottom, and with the magnetized paper, it doesn't get knocked over or bumped around. Same with the score markers here. Each of the score markers is a magnetized token that has the team symbol on the top of it, done with sticker paper, I guess it is. And so again, the scores are easy to track here on the scoreboards. The other thing I've done for ease of play is made these flowchart reference sheets with markers that players can advance as the play progresses so that they know what exactly happens next depending on if the attacker or defender has the ball, whether a shot's being made, and how all that plays out. So it's a very simple matter of going step by step to know exactly what you need to do next in your turn. As you can imagine, all of that was an immense amount of work, but in the end, I turned Helvetia Cup into a real deal soccer game, and I was really quite pleased with the final results. Unfortunately, COVID has kind of killed the whole soccer thing. My kid hasn't been able to play soccer, so it hasn't been on his mind very much, and we haven't played this game in a very long time, but I'm still quite pleased with how everything turned out with this particular game. It's certainly an example of the game that I've probably put the most work into customizing in terms of taking every single component and redoing it. Are any of you component customizers? I'd really love to hear what you've done to enhance your games and make them more enjoyable for yourself. Tell me all about it in the comments. Holy cow, you made it to the end of this video. That really does mean a lot to me. The other thing that means a lot to me is if you would give it a thumb up or subscribe to my channel, or maybe share this video with one person that you think would enjoy it. Cheers. And my starting point was the figures. I knew I had to find some little mini soccer players somewhere. Yeah.